Walid Phares is a Fox News terrorism analyst, and he's the author of the great book, The Coming Revolution. Prescient, to say the least. Dr. Phares, how are you? Great to talk to you again.
Thank you very much for having me on your show, Laura.
Let's talk about what all this means, because no big surprise today, the New York Times, for Obama, some vindication of his approach to war, that this was a multilateral operation and that the U.S. didn't have to lead. But isn't it the case that without the superiority of American air power and American power in our oceans, that there is no way that this operation would have been able to be carried off at all?
Well, of course, ask the Libyans first. They have been trying, indeed, for the previous 42 years. There have been many uprisings. There have been many attempts to overthrow Qaddafi. We were not helping them, therefore they weren't able to do it on their own. It's only when we, through NATO, were able to bring down the air power, the anti-aircraft missile range system of Qaddafi, bringing down and pounding every tank, that the rebels on the road were able to seize the moment. So yes, without the United States' direct military strategic role, it wouldn't have been happening.
Now, the situation on the ground, as it is today in Libya, is precarious, to say the least. We've seen what's happened in Egypt, in the post-Mubarak Egypt, with Christians being slaughtered and targeted, and I think we just lost Dr. Phares. We'll bring him back. But we've seen what's happened, right? We have this major vacuum that is to be expected in circumstances like this, for sure. But we better be very careful how we proceed here, or what we wish for. We start urging these revolutions and giving our support to these revolutions. Well, it's great when they work out well and when there's a clear democratic force on the ground that's ready to take power and not oppress others. A true democratic a bunch of folks who are going to step into this vacuum and do the right thing. But how often does that happen? Is he back with us? Yeah, Dr. Phares, sorry about that. This is no
worries.
These are phones. They just cut out sometimes. But I was just saying that you have to be careful what you wish for, because we've seen the slaughter of Christians in Egypt. And throughout the Middle East, we have the Arab Spring, which sounds good in theory and might end up being good. But right now, it looks like Islamism is on the rise, and America's cheering it.
Let me explain, give one example in comparative politics of what this could look like. When the Poles and the Czechoslovaks and the Romanians got rid of the Nazis, what did they get in return after that? They got the communists for another many decades. What is happening throughout the Arab Spring, which I have projected, is that the authoritarian leaders such as Mubarak, a soft authoritarian leader compared to Qaddafi, a bloody one, when those leaders are going down, there is a race, a quick race between civil society forces on the one hand and the Islamists, and behind them the jihadists. And it seems that those who are winning the race right now are the Islamist militias in Libya. There is no doubt about it. They have the control of most of the neighborhoods. They have the control of the cities. They have the control of the media. So the beginning of the revolt in Libya was done by civil society people. But those who are closing in and seizing are the Islamist militia. So if you want to measure the success of the Libyan operation, of course it's not moving from authoritarianism to democracy, but from authoritarianism to an Islamist regime.
Well, it looks like as of now, the most energized and the best organized of all the factions out there happen to be the most radical Islamist elements, and they're in the Muslim Brotherhood, but they're way beyond the Muslim Brotherhood as well. Am I stating that correctly? I mean, you're the expert in this region.
I could give you examples. I mean, there's a long list of examples. The current commander of the military council in Tripoli, who is he? Abdul Hakim Belhaj. He is one of the jihadi commanders who worked with Al-Qaeda. And it's open information. There is nothing secret about it. You could Google that in Arabic and in English, and you can find out. Look at every single footage over the past now 5 months, not in the beginning, but over the past 5 months, of the quote-unquote rebels on the ground. You look at the flags, you look at the inscriptions on the jeeps, you listen to the chanting. it's somewhere between Salafists, jihadists, Al-Qaeda. So it's a combo of things, but it is certainly not the, social democrats or liberals or even, any form of seculars. So indeed, on the ground, Laura, what you have is a takeover by the Islamist militias. There are some members of the Transitional Council who are, secular former bureaucrats, former judges, former military commanders. But the most important one, General, Fathi Yunus, was basically assassinated by the Muslim militias in a few months ago. So this is telling about who is going to be seizing power in Libya if we do not partner with right civil society forces.
You're listening to the Laura Ingraham Show, 800-876-4123. The Obama administration, I think, hoping that this foreign policy victory, as they're framing it, ends up being very helpful in this election year. And that's not really surprising, Dr. Phares, because of the difficult U.S. economy and the failure of multiple Obama policies to revive the economy, for the president to say, look, we've had challenges there, but I'll tell you something that is working. Our anti-terror policy. We've killed Osama bin Laden, and we've helped in significant ways the operation that ended up killing Muammar Qaddafi. So who has a better record on fighting terror? How do you respond to that?
All these arguments can be responded to when, of course, the critics are going to be looking very closely. For example, the elimination of bin Laden. This is something that should have been done a long time ago. It is good that it happened, but then look at the expansion of Al-Qaeda. Instead of few hundreds in Afghanistan, they are now in Pakistan, very close from Islamabad. They have expanded in Yemen, in Somalia, in the Sahel of Africa, across cells inside the United States, and their cells inside Europe are very, evident. So if you want to do, plus and minus, you could establish that. With regard to the Arab Spring, well, before the Arab Spring, we have not spoken about the Arab Spring. Let me give you the example of Libya. U.S. leaders and the president said, well, Qaddafi has been a criminal, has been a terrorist, has been a genocidal person for many, many years. But this only happened when the Arab Spring began. So we didn't have a policy on the Arab Spring. And what is the Arab Spring producing is the most important thing. It's not the downfall of the current leaders only. It's who's going to take over.
Well, and there is great danger in vacuums. I say this to my staff all the time. There's a vacuum. Guess what? Someone steps into it. I try to teach people, just in the workplace, how to work. Outperform. And all my friends who are looking for jobs, I say, guess what? Get into a workplace and outperform. That's the only way to assure that you keep a job. Outperform. That means same thing in foreign policy, right? You leave a vacuum in place, and all the people who have been itching to be in power for all those years, who actually have ambition for power, ambition to succeed, and even if in their twisted, warped ways, they will be successful, or at least have momentary successes, which could end up killing a lot of people. And we see this happening with the Christians.
Absolutely. Across the region, Laura, we know, you and I know, that Christian minorities, Christian communities have been persecuted now more than ever. In Iraq, the Assyrian Christians are being persecuted by the jihadists. In Egypt, the Coptic population, they just demonstrated yesterday, the day before, in Washington, are now being, not just attacked by the jihadists, but also by the units of the army. And so goes for other countries in the Middle East. In Iran, their pastors are being, accused of betrayal and put on trial. The situation of the Christians in the Middle East, about 25 million, of course their diasporas are enormous. We're talking about 30 million Middle Eastern Christians around the world, including 4 million in the United States. They're not very happy with that.
Well, and I would say that for our Christian brothers and sisters who live in the Middle East, the cradle of their own faiths, and who have been terrorized and abused, women raped, thousands of women raped, and attempts to make them convert to Islam. These are just horrific stories. And so forgive me if I'm not necessarily celebrating the Arab Spring. I want to see what the Arab Spring brings. Then I'll celebrate. I'm not celebrating
now. Yes, I think this is the answer, the real answer. Let me add one more thing, if I can.
Sure.
Not only Christians or minorities. Liberal Muslims are suffering in the Middle East. Progressive Muslims are suffering in the Middle East. And they don't understand how this administration and some European governments are working with the Muslim Brotherhood and partnering with them against their colleagues, the liberals in the region.
And I'm glad you said that, because we can't limit it to one group of people that's been who has been deeply, deeply harmed because of what's happened. Dr. Phares, before we let you go, Joe Biden yesterday said that this is the prescription for future military operations for the United States. This is a model. What would your response to that be? Because now all the news reports, GOP criticism is blunted because of the successful operation, and this is the recipe, the prescription for the future. Is it? Should it be?
Well, I think this is a procedure. This is a measurement. You would know that this is correct or wrong with the results. It's not the procedure, it's the result. If any kind of operation ends up having an Islamist neo-Taliban regime, whatever that operation was, it did not get to what we want. But if any operation or non-operation led to the establishment of a democracy, as was the case with the Syrian revolution, we didn't even have fighters in the air of Lebanon, and yet the Syrians were ousted. So it's the result, not the procedure.
And it's always great to talk to you. Dr. Walid Phares, a fabulous book that was so scarily ahead of the curve, The Coming Revolution, Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East. Dr. Phares, thank you, and come back soon. We love talking to you.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, we're going to...